Hi, welcome to Astrology for GAN Traders. My name is Olga Morales. Now I'm taking the opportunity of today, the 3rd of August 2016, the new moon in Leo, to make a recording regarding the next 2 months of August and September 2016 because really in terms of planetary activity, they are full on with phenomena that you need to be aware of. If you follow my blog or are on my mailing list, I would have alerted you already to some of these things that I'll be presenting in this video. But please keep alert and know what's ahead. And that's the advantage of astrology. Actually, you can see in this picture here, this is the actual eclipse on the 1st of September. We can see all this red energy in here because these are hard aspects if you're new to astrology. And hard aspects mean the planets are either, well, these in particular here, an opposition, that's the eclipse with Neptune, but then a square with Mars and Saturn. And these two here are known as the most difficult planets in the coming together, the malefics they're known as. So we need to be aware of what's going on. So let's get started. The first thing I want to point out is the Mars reaches its maximum south declination in August, September and into October. So we need to know about this. It's a different type of phenomena in terms of planetary declination. Not many astrologers actually work with it, so you need to be aware of this as well. So let's have a look at what all that means. If we go to, basically Mars is out of bounds. He goes out of bounds on the 8th of August and it's all the way until the 30th of October. The maximum he will reach will be minus 26 degrees south declination mid-September. So Mars will continue to play havoc this year. Mars has a 15-year cycle. This year Mars travels out of bounds maximum south. Last time was in 2001. 2001 was the year we witnessed the 9/11 attacks in New York City. When a celestial body is out of bounds, its energy becomes abnormal and unpredictable. The energy is unleashed without limitations. And with Mars, the energy takes on a very aggressive and warlike temperament and hot as hell. It also brings hot weather because he is a fiery planet. So let's have a look at what it actually means visually for you to understand. This is a chart this year of planetary declination for 2016, and you can see that I've actually put in that this is like this is the Tropic of Cancer at the top, which is plus 23.5, and negative, we can see a little Capricorn here, minus 23.5 is a Tropic of Capricorn. Okay, so you can see the sun reaches, this is the sun, this line reaches, that's when it reaches, that's a summer solstice in northern hemisphere on June 21st, okay, and when it comes to northern declination is the winter solstice in December 21. Okay, so that's northern declination dates, and opposite for southern declination. Anytime a planet goes beyond that, it's called out of bounds. You can see Venus went out of bounds in June. Mercury went out of bounds for a short period, but this is what we're interested in is Mars going out of bounds, and it actually goes exactly on the 8th of August 2016, 5 more days. The maximum will be minus 26 degrees in sort of the mid to end of September. It sort of flatlines. There's a station and declination here, and then again it will come out of bounds and travel, okay, more northbound. But what we need to observe, is that in this whole period when he's out of bounds, we're going to have 2 lunar eclipses and 1 solar eclipse right in the middle. So there's a lot happening at the same time. Okay, and this is what you've got to be aware of with all planetary cycles. It's not just one thing, it's a whole lot of them clustering together in the same period. So last time, this is actually, I've plotted this chart. Basically the yellow line is the sun's declination and the red line is Mars's declination. And you can see when it goes way beyond the sun's declination, like in 92, 93, that's north declination. And then south declination, you can see here in 2001. And again, we're going to have it in 2016. But in 2018, at the end of it also, it will be even lower than it is in 2016. So it will go even lower in terms of southern declination. So there's another cycle in there we need to watch in the future. Again, the maximum north declination was 2007, 2008, and that was just before the global financial crisis. Okay, so these were the lows are at, as well in the markets, and the 9/11, and this is a period now. So it's 15-year cycle. When Mars was out of bounds, South peaks actually peaks on the 23rd of September this year. Okay, so that's that line here that I've got. That's actually in here. But this little graph you can keep as a reference to see every time Mars has been south declination are these little spikes here. But the higher they are, it means the higher the declination is, or the lower the declination is. But in this respect, it's just the south. So you can see those peaks and how the market reacts to those peaks. Okay, the next one I just want to point out for the GAN people, a 15-year cycle equals GAN's 180 months, which is a time period that he tells you to watch. And 15 years, we need to also be aware that Saturn has travelled 180 degrees, or half its cycle. At the 9/11 attack, Saturn was at 14 Gemini 45. In 2016, this year, Saturn has been transiting opposite this degree in Sagittarius. This year, Saturn will also join Mars on the 24th of August, both aligned to the fixed star Antares, which is the heart of the Scorpion. 15 months equals 150. 15 years equals 180 months. To add to the drama, this year there will be a lunar eclipse on the 18th of August, solar eclipse on the 1st of September, and another lunar eclipse on the 16th of September. All this time, Mars will be out of bounds. That's just a recap on what's happening. Now, where Mars, it will be conjunct Saturn on the 24th of August, and 9 degrees of Sagittarius with Antares. These are the global hotspots. So what we can do with any timing of any event, we can plot these planetary lines on the map. It's astrocartography. And you can see where those planets will either be rising or on the ascendant, on the midheaven, or the IC. And they're the most important angles of a chart. So just to look at where they'll be on the MC, we've got Russia, Mongolia, China, Malaysia, and Jakarta going through that meridian there. In the lower meridian, they'll be going through Washington, D.C., close to Miami, Colombia, and Peru. Okay, in there. So I didn't put the rising and setting, just to give you an indication of what areas might be important at this time. So let's go to the next slide. Now, with Mars, Saturn equals Antares. Antares, with Mars, is detrimental habits affecting the life, quarrels with friends and relatives. With Saturn, materialistic, dishonest through circumstances created by environment, religious hypocrisies, many disappointments, loss through quarrels and legal affairs, trouble through enemies, many failures, hampered by relatives, unfavourable for domestic matters, much sickness too, and sorrow from children. So, we've got two malefic planets on a really malefic point of the zodiac, okay, believed by the ancients to be quite difficult. So also, in terms of disease, Hippocrates, the father of medicine in the 15th century, believed that all epidemics stem from the atmosphere. He classified acute fevers, eruptive inflammations like scarlatina and measles as martial, therefore under the influence of Mars. Saturn was connected with deep-seated depressions, cold congestions leading to epidemics and influenzas. And Reinhold Eberton, he calls Mars-Saturn related to the inflammation of the bones or bone marrow, death or atrophy of an organ, particularly the paralysis of muscles belonging to the breathing mechanism. So death through suffocation. So it's possible that we will see more flus and epidemics around the world because of this alignment. Okay, now go back to that slide. I also want to point out that this chart here is a chart I put up early in the year called Danger Periods to be looking out and I've just included it here just to recap, because in August Mars will be back, because he's been going retrograde and now he's direct. He'll be going back to where he was in March when there were attacks in Turkey and Belgium. Okay, so I've got some peaks here, the 14th of August, 25th of August, and also in the 11th of September in this graph. Now they're the peaks, so it's not just at that time that is the I suppose the point of where it's going to happen. We need to have some orb in these periods, but pretty much in that period Mars will be, on those dates, Mars will be exactly at some midpoints that it was back in March. Okay, now the next thing we need to look at is the moon wobble. A moon wobble was discovered by, or spoken about by, Carl Payne Tobey, and his work found that all solar and lunar eclipses are moon wobbles. A moon wobble's maximum is 86.5 days a period, or 3 weeks. Begin 2 weeks before and a week after the exact event. He discovered that disasters happened about every 3 months and were correlated with geometric square to the possible eclipse point. So look for when the sun is conjunct, square, or opposite the node. So that's 90 degrees on the dial, the same point on the fourth harmonic. So let's have a look. His research showed during the moon wobble periods, time and space are unstable. He showed that during the moon wobble there are increased conditions for natural disasters, floods, bizarre weather patterns, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions and tornadoes, plane crashes, boat, train or car accidents, explosions, fires, riots and mass murder, increased accidents and violence, political and personal upheavals. So this year's moon wobble dates, basically, as he said, all eclipses, solar and lunar, are moon wobbles, but also when the sun makes a square to the nodes. Okay, so we had that in middle in June, on the June the 7th. Now remember, there's a 2-day period before and one after, so there's a 3-week period when there's more likelihood of things to go wrong according to the research. And so the next one will be right in between all the eclipses. So there's going to be a lunar eclipse on the 18th of August, a solar eclipse on the 1st of September, the sun conjunct the node on the 5th of September, the moon, that's a lunar eclipse there, and then there'll be another moon wobble in November, on the November 30. So these are things you need to be watching as well. Okay, now this is the best way to have a look at what the moon wobble actually looks like. If you plot your lunar node on a graph, you will see that while it's moving during the times of eclipses, you can see that its actual movement is quite staggered. There's a lot of gyrations between the sun, moon and the earth reflected in the position of the nodes. So you can see how it goes direct, retrograde. So it's all that period is what the moon wobble is about. So this is the one in March, February, March area, and April. And now we're coming into here. We're right in here now when the node's going to start making funny movements, and that's when we know the moon wobble's in effect. Okay, so now this is the exciting part for me, being a GAN person. It's actually going to be exactly 84 years since the solar eclipse in 1932, which is the last page of Tunnel Through the Air. And you can see that eclipse happened on August 31, and the one this year has actually happened on September 1st. So it's exactly 84 years since GAN was writing Tunnel Through the Air. And I mean, the highlight of his book was this eclipse at the end. So the degree for in 1932 was 8 degrees of Virgo, and the one we're going to be having on the 1st of September is 9 degrees of Virgo. So it's 1 degree difference. So this is the actual eclipse from 1932. Sorry, that should be 1932 there. You can see how it was visible over New York, and that was the ending of the book. Okay, so it must be important, obviously. So let's have a look. What I've done here, I've put the eclipse from Tunnel Through the Air in 1932 on the inner wheel, And I've put the one that we're going to have on September the 1st, again plotted for New York. What the amazing thing is, 84 years is also 1,008 months. Now that number is really quite important, especially if you've read my book, Dawn of the Seventh Day. Now, what happens in 84 years? Well, we know there's a Uranus return. It's its cycle, okay? And you can see it here happening right as we speak, okay? Right at the same, it's only 2 degrees of, although now that Uranus has gone retrograde, it will be hitting that exact point very soon. Neptune is actually opposite itself. So Neptune in 1932 was at 7 Virgo, and at the moment it's at 10 Pisces, okay? Jupiter has actually done 7 revolutions. Jupiter cycles 12 into 84, gives us 7 revolutions, okay? So it's in Virgo, but it's a little bit more beyond where it was in 1932, but still in the same sign. The lunar nodes, they've done 4.5 revolution, and this is the important point, because you can see the nodes lining up. There's only 5 degrees difference in there, but they're opposite to where they were because of the 0.5 means opposition. But the amazing thing about eclipses, they can either occur on a north or south node. Therefore, after 84 years in these 2 charts, you can see how they've swapped positions, but the timing is the same. So the eclipse on the 1st of September is actually linked to the one in Tunnel Through the Air because of this. So it's amazing. And of course I love it. Okay. Now let's have a look. This is the eclipse the solar eclipse that's coming up. The one that looks quite difficult to say the least. Okay. So what I've done here, I've plotted it again on the solar map. So you can actually see the central pathway of the eclipse, which is a red line going right through pretty much the center of Africa. Okay, but they're all the partial lines as well. Okay, so you can see the span of it, and the actual points where the eclipse will be overhead will be in this point. So that's why it's on the MC, and you can see it's going through Russia, all of the Middle East, and parts of Africa there, and also in here. So and you can see, this is what I want to point out, I'm sure you can see on this chart, the same time, if you see the rising coming up of Mars and Saturn at that point, okay, so it's like this is like a pivotal point in here over Ethiopia and a little bit lower down from Ethiopia in there. The other thing is, if we go to see where the Saturn and Mars are overhead, you can see them going through parts of Japan, above, well, that's Papua New Guinea, and all over Australia actually, Northern Territory, right down in here. And you can also see that over Tokyo, the eclipse will be rising over Tokyo, declining over Tokyo on the descender because it's dark. Okay, so these are their pivots, that's why I've put them there. And in terms of where it's happening on this point, it will be through the Pacific. There'll be little islands in that area there. And again, the Mars-Saturn, this is the one that I'm really sort of worried about. Mars-Saturn and the eclipse going right through Brazil and Rio de Janeiro. And we know what's happening in Rio, like this month, the Olympics. I'm really quite worried about that because of this alignment. And I'll show you more in a minute. So this is another way you can plot these eclipses on the globe, which I love as well. So you can just see the lineup going through Saudi Arabia, Iraq, part of Russia, Yemen, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Madagascar. Okay, that's where that whole center line, in terms of where the overhead on the meridian, where the eclipse will be. Okay. And the next slide, this is what I wanted to focus again, all going through Brazil, and Antarctica in there. Just to bring it in more, sort of to zoom into the area, you can see that energy going through Brazil and Rio. Okay, this is actually the Sun, the actual eclipse of Neptune and the node, and we've got the Mars-Saturn pretty much going right through there. Okay, so this is the actual chart. When I plotted the eclipse, solar eclipse rising over Rio de Janeiro, this is what we get. So we can see the eclipse rising. Okay, it's there. We can see Neptune on the descendant and this Mars and Saturn right on the IC. The IC is under our feet. Okay, and this is usually when you're doing a mundane chart, influences the people, the weather patterns, because it's really the location of the this eclipse has a very hard angular pattern, often denoting major world issues. The mutable cross is once again activated, with Uranus also involved on the eighth harmonic. Can you see how we're making a 135 to both the eclipse and also to the Saturn and Mars down here? So if I put that on a dial, it would be across the dial. So very intense here, because we've got the planet of sudden explosions, unexpected events to happen as well, linked in with this hard energy. Critical hotspots on the globe are those areas where planets are rising, which is the ascendant, culminating, which is the MC, descending, which is the descendant, or anti-culminating, which is the IC. This eclipse is very centered over Brazil, and Rio de Janeiro is right under the Mars IC eclipse Neptune. The Rio Olympics are part of this extreme energy, and thus I have grave concerns about the safety issues around the games. So another way to look at eclipses is in the olden days, I suppose they used to use their decans in relation to the point of the eclipse. And for this one, because it's 9 degrees of Virgo, you can see that it's still in the decan controlled by the sun. But according to this position, it denotes great calamity to the death of some king or ruler. Now, I've said this for New York, and it also falls in the first house set for New York, and that is the country and inhabitants as a whole. So there might be some sort of concern over a leader, okay, in that respect. Now, what I've done, if you remember my map, I've also put here, Tokyo is under also direct influence of this eclipse. And the meridian continues through Central Australia, pretty much all through Northern Territory and Adelaide. So you can see how it's actually on a descendant over Tokyo, but we've got the Mars, Saturn over on the MC, and we've got Neptune rising, and we've got Uranus here in the second house. So Tokyo's in the spotlight as well. Also, it's culminating over the Middle East and Saudi Arabia especially. You can see how they'll be able to see it in the middle of the day under the pathway, and also they'll be able to see it. So this is another hot spot. You can see that the Neptune node is right on the IC over the Middle East. Okay, now I want to bring in also, when we're looking at anything to do with eclipses and the moon, we also need to look at the Metonic eclipse cycle, which is 18 years ago. And you could keep going back 18 years, 18 years, 18 years for your own research. But 18 years ago was 1997. So what was happening in the world 19 years ago? The Metonic eclipses return to the same point in the zodiac every 19 years, the same day. Where do you have 9 degrees of Virgo in your natal chart? Think back 19 years. What were you doing, and what influence did it have on you? Now, if we remember 19 years ago, what happened 19 years ago, we were mourning the tragic death of Princess Diana. We may hear more news about her at this repeat eclipse, and only last week, if you're aware of the news, Prince Harry only spoke of his regret about never talking about Diana's death last week. So, it's amazing that it is the 19-year cycle. So the actual transits of the solar eclipse, she actually died on the 31st of August, and it was only 2 days before this solar eclipse. Okay, and in her chart, there's a lot of Mars, Pluto, Mercury, Pluto, Neptune to a Saturn, and this dial, the Venus, Saturn across the dial from the Pluto and the Mars in her chart. There's more, but I'm not going to bring it all up in this presentation. So what happens with eclipse paths is that there's a Saros repeat. Now the Saros cycle is every 18 years plus 10 or 11 days, and it moves 115 degrees west. So what that means is, see, this is, if we start our first eclipse here, right, then we go to the next one, it's actually moving, it's almost 120 degrees, but it's 115 degrees across west. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is another movement, and then it comes back the 4th time almost to the same position on the Earth plane, and that's exactly 54 years in a similar area. So you can actually do this with your own personal chart, because it's like we're all born with a prenatal and postnatal eclipse, and you can actually progress these onto your charts and have a look if maybe that's had an influence on where you've moved in the world. I've done this in one of my lectures at the AFA. So let's have a look at 54 years ago. We want to know what was happening 54 years ago. That actually happened on the 31st of July 1962. There was an eclipse path in the same position as it will be on the 1st of September 2016. So a good way to research this. Now if you want to do this thoroughly, I recommend you get Bill Meridian's book on eclipse pathways, and he does a lot of detailed work on this. So, but if we have a look at what was happening in 1962, you can see how this area, basically all of Africa, parts of South America and a little bit in Washington there, and parts of Europe, Middle East, were under the influence of this eclipse. You can see maybe what was happening. Rwanda gained independence. Algeria became independent from France, which is right under the pathway. The death of Marilyn Monroe, not under the pathway, but she had aspects in her chart. Trinidad and Tobago become independent. A flash flood in Barcelona, Spain kills more than 440 people, again under the influence here. And the beginning of the Cuban Missile Crisis in Cuba, it's right like the beginning of the eclipse in here in terms of the meridian. Okay, now there are obviously more world events, but notice how the areas under the pathway are highlighted. We may hear more news about these areas again, so keep an eye out. Okay, now also we need to look at, I found this eclipse in 1960 over Chile, which is very similar to what we're having on the 1st of September, but the eclipse pattern was more on the, was more on the Chile part and Peru part, whereas the one we're having now is going to be going over the Rio de Janeiro part. Okay, but still in South America. Now this one was the year that the Great Chilean Earthquake, which reached 9.2 on the Richter scale, leading to huge tsunamis, even reaching Australia, if you want to research it. Similarities between these two eclipses. So I'm just highlighting that for reference for your own research if you want to look at it a bit more. So that's the end of my presentation. I've put in as much as I can in a short amount of time. I will have the slides from these recording up on my blog, which is here at this link. If you've never listened to me on YouTube, that's my YouTube channel. I've got lots of free videos on there. I've actually joined Twitter now. That's I'm AstroGan33, and my Facebook page is Astrology for GAN Traders on Facebook. So thank you for listening.